Okay, so I need you to just stop everything for a second and look at the title of the document you sent me this morning. Because I am looking at it right now, and I am honestly convinced there is a massive typo.
No typo. I actually checked it like 3 times myself before I sent it over.
It literally says in bold letters, Buddha was not liberated. The Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama, the guy who is basically the poster child for liberation. I mean, the man who sat under the Bodhi tree and supposedly solved the entire riddle of existence. And we are starting this deep dive today with the premise that he failed, that he didn't actually make it to the finish line.
It is not that he failed. It is that we might have completely misunderstood where the finish line actually is. And yeah, it sounds like absolute heresy. It sounds like some ultimate clickbait hot take you see on social media.
Yeah, it sounds like internet contrarianism, like someone's just trying to go viral by tipping over a sacred cow.
Right, exactly. That was my first reaction too. But here is the thing. This is not coming from some random Reddit thread. This is not coming from a casual commentator. This perspective comes from a source that is so incredibly unique and so deeply steeped in the actual mechanics of these traditions that we really have to take it seriously. We are looking at the work of Osman, who is also known as the blind Muslim yogi.
The blind Muslim yogi.
What?
You have to admit that is an amazing branding masterpiece right there. But it also sounds like a total paradox.
It does, doesn't it? But that paradox is exactly why this deep dive is going to be so completely different from what you usually hear. We are not just looking at a religious history lesson here. We are looking at a technical manual for consciousness. Osman is not arguing about theology. He is arguing about the physics of it. He is arguing about the actual job description of an avatar.
So the mission for today, for you listening right now, is to unpack this really specific claim. The idea that being awake, which the Buddha famously claimed to be, is fundamentally different from being liberated. And that most of us, including all the hardcore spiritual seekers, have been completely conflating those two terms for thousands of years.
Exactly. We are going to look at the mechanics of the matrix, if you will. What does it mean to wake up in the simulation versus what does it actually mean to unplug and leave the simulation entirely? And why would someone like the Buddha consciously choose one over the other?
But before we get into the heavy metaphysics, though, because I can already tell my brain is going to be throbbing by the end of this, we need to establish who's actually driving the bus here. Who is Osman? Because if I'm going to sit here and entertain the idea that the Buddha was not free, then the person telling me that better have some absolutely serious credentials.
Oh, he definitely does. And his background is intense. Osman is a bioenergy healer operating at what he describes as a master level. And he is not just waving crystals around or talking about good vibes. He explicitly frames his healing work through the principles of quantum entanglement. He also possesses telepathic healing capabilities.
Quantum entanglement, right? So that is the physics concept where two particles are linked across space. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance.
Precisely. Osman applies that actual scientific principle to healing. And he specializes in the heaviest stuff critical care recovery terminal illnesses. He is stepping in where conventional medicine might be hitting a wall. He offers his services on a complementary basis. He makes it very clear he is not a replacement for the medical fields. He's there to enhance whatever is lacking in other medical treatments.
That is an important distinction.
Very important. And he has been doing this for 50 years. He attained his first samadhi experience by the age of 19.
Wait, pause. For the listener who hasn't spent a decade studying ancient texts, define samadhi real quick.
Samadhi is often translated as absorption or union. If you look at the works of Swami Sivananda from the Divine Life Society or the ancient texts, it is the state where the meditator's individual consciousness completely merges with the object of meditation. It is total stillness.
So to hit that at 19 implies a prodigy level of dedication.
Exactly. He has studied extensively from various schools of thought across the Far East, the Middle East, and the West. And his approach is incredibly scientific. In fact, his whole mission is to encourage as many people as possible into a scientific, result-based, and simplified methodology for ancient yoga and meditation. He has spent his whole life trying to simplify these really complex protocols.
And his own practice schedule is wild, right?
Unbelievable. To get to this high success rate he has had in the past 50 years, his rigorous practice extended up to 18 hours a day in certain stages of his life. Even currently, he practices a minimum of 8 to 10 hours a day, just as he puts it, sharpening the sword.
8 to 10 hours just to maintain. 18 hours at his peak. That leaves 6 hours for sleeping and eating. It sounds physically impossible.
It does sound impossible, but it reminds me so much of what we hear on the Huberman Lab podcast with Professor Andrew Huberman. If you look at 3 specific episodes from Huberman's show, you see the science of this extreme dedication. First, look at Huberman's episode with David Goggins, where they talk about the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, the part of the brain that grows when you do things you don't want to do. Osman's 18-hour practice is like the ultimate workout for that brain region.
Yeah, and Huberman's second relevant episode would be the one with Dr. Matthew Walker on sleep and memory wiping, which actually ties into something we will discuss later about Maya. And the third one is his episode with Dr. Norman Doidge on neuroplasticity.
Right, that neuroplasticity point is crucial because Osman is blind. Huberman and Dr. Doidge discuss how when one sensory input like sight is removed, the brain radically reallocates its resources. In Osman's case, his lack of physical sight likely amplified his internal perception of bioenergy. He sees the quantum field because he's not distracted by the visual world.
Which explains why he has the uncommon ability to heal on such serious levels. And because of that intensive long-term practice and his high success rates, his treatments and consultation fees are premium. They are not inexpensive.
Correct, but he does not withhold information. While his energy healing is a paid premium service, his teachings are widely available. He wants to revive this lost science to help society improve their health, peace of mind, relationships, and finances. You can find his free videos on his YouTube channel, The Blind Muslim Yogi. He also has a website, yogawellness786.com, where people can access his Patreon for paid live daily videos, one-on-one consultations, and group sessions.
And he also has an audio podcast track.
Yes. You can listen to his podcast on both Apple Podcasts and Spotify by searching for the channel name The Blind Muslim Yogi. Definitely remind yourselves to follow his channel if you use those platforms.
Okay, so the credibility is absolutely established. We have a master technician of consciousness. Now let us go back to the central bomb he dropped. Buddha was not liberated. Let us unpack the linguistic trap there.
So Osman points to a very specific interaction. A Brahmin priest sees the Buddha shortly after his enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. The Buddha is radiating energy. He looks divine. The Brahmin asks him, "Are you a god?" Buddha says, "No." "Are you an angel?" "No." "Are you a man?" "No."
And then the Brahmin asks, well then, what are you?
And the Buddha replies, "I am awake."
Buddha, the awakened one. We usually just take that as poetry for being completely free.
But Osman looks at it scientifically. He says, if Buddha were liberated in the technical sense, he would have simply answered, "Yes, I am liberated." There are millions of people who are awake, but that does not mean they are free from the cycle of birth and death.
So liberation specifically means you are off the wheel. You do not come back. Nirvana in the strictest sense. Unplugging the console and leaving the simulation entirely.
Exactly. Being awake means you realize you are in the simulation, you see the code, you know the walls are not solid, but you are still in the game. And Buddha stayed in the game. He taught for 45 years after that moment. He was interacting, he was functioning.
But couldn't you argue that he was just hanging around by choice and could leave whenever he wanted?
That is where Osman introduces the avatar paradox. He brings in the Hindu perspective here, which predicted the birth of Buddha as an incarnation of the Vishnu aspect of God. Vishnu is the preserver.
I have actually heard this discussed a lot on the Ranveer Show podcast with Ranveer Labadia. Beer biceps.
Yes, Ranveer does great deep dives into this. If you look at 3 specific episodes of the Ranveer Show, you see this avatar concept detailed. First, his episode with Subguru, where they explicitly discuss the mechanics of karma and how avatars operate outside normal karmic laws, but are bound by cosmic duty. Second, Ranveer's episode with Swami Mukundananda, where they talk about mind management and how divine incarnations take on physical limitations purposefully.
And the third one would be his episode with Jay Shetty Wright, where they talk about the concept of dharma and duty, the monk mindset of serving others before yourself.
Exactly, and that duty is the trap. Osman points out that just like Krishna Buddha is an avatar, why do avatars come back? To correct declines in humanity, to fight evil, to revive lost knowledge. Because they have a specific job to do, they are bound to return. They sacrifice their liberation for the sake of service.
So they are technically not liberated, they are on standby. As long as humanity is suffering, they are on the clock.
Right. If you read Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, he touches on this constantly. Yogananda talks about masters who are fully awake but choose to return to the physical plane simply to help lift the consciousness of the planet. Or look at the teachings of Swami Vivekananda and his guru Sri Ramakrishna. Ramakrishna used to say that some souls are like a boat that crosses the river and then comes back to ferry others across.
So the Buddha is the ultimate ferryman.
Hmm.
He's awake to the river, but he is not free of the river because he refuses to leave us on the shore.
That is a brilliant way to put it. And if we accept that coming back reincarnation is the reality of the system, then we have to talk about the mechanism that keeps the rest of us trapped while we are here. Maya, the illusion.
Usually Maya is the bad guy in spiritual philosophy. It is the veil of ignorance. But Osman frames it completely differently. He treats it almost like a biological necessity, an illusory curtain that wipes memory. Why do we forget our past lives? The standard answer is just that we are ignorant. But Osman asks us to consider the sheer utility of amnesia.
Imagine if you remembered every single one of your past lives. Think about the conversations on the Diary of a CEO with Stephen Bartlett. Bartlett has had 3 specific episodes that really highlight why remembering everything would destroy us. First, his interview with Dr. Gabor Mate on trauma. Mate explains how just one lifetime of childhood trauma completely rewires our nervous system and can cause lifelong illness.
Imagine compounding that trauma over 1,000 lifetimes.
Exactly. Then look at Bartlett's second relevant episode with Mo Gadot talking about the algorithm of happiness and how the brain obsessively focuses on negative past events to protect us. If you had 5,000 years of negative events to focus on, your brain would short circuit. And third, his episode with Dr. Joe Dispenza on rewiring the mind, where Dispenza talks about how people get stuck in their past emotional loops.
If you remembered that your current wife murdered you in a past life, you could not possibly function today. You would be paralyzed.
So Osman says Maya clears the slate to allow for focus. We enter as a blank slate to learn and experience without the crushing baggage of thousands of previous existences. Maya is a feature, not a bug.
That reframing is so powerful. It actually mirrors a lot of what Rainn Wilson explores on the Soul Boom podcast. He treats suffering and human limitation as spiritual tools. If you look at Rainn's episode with Reza Aslan, they discuss how humanity's perception of the divine has to be limited for us to even grasp it.
Yes, and Soul Boom's episode with Rich Roll touches on how hitting absolute rock bottom, the ultimate suffering, is often the only thing that initiates real transformation. And Rainn's conversation with Maim Bialik bridges that gap between scientific limitation and religious awe. Osman is basically saying Maya is the ultimate scientific constraint designed by the universe so we can actually get our work done.
Okay, so Maya wipes our memory so we can function. But being awake means breaking that illusion while still being in the world. So what does an awake person actually see?
This is where Osman's bioenergy expertise really shines. He says 99.99% of people, the sleeping ones, see a chair as just an object, sand as dirt, a mountain as a dead rock.
But the awake person sees the energy aspect.
Yes. Osman explicitly states that an awake person sees the chair, the mountain, the ocean, and the soil as having living consciousness and their own independent frequencies. Everything is alive.
This sounds a lot like panpsychism, the idea that consciousness is fundamental to the universe, which has been getting a lot of traction lately, even in mainstream podcasts.
Absolutely. Think about the Joe Rogan Experience. Rogan touches on this constantly. There are 3 episodes that perfectly align with Osman's view here. First, Rogan's episode with Duncan Trussell. They constantly dive into Buddhist philosophy and the idea that the universe is a singular living organism.
Duncan is great at explaining that simulation theory aspect, too.
Right. Second is Rogan's episode with Paul Stamets, the mycologist. Stamets talks about mycelial networks under the soil acting like a literal brain for the forest, showing that the soil itself possesses a form of living consciousness and intelligence. And third, Rogan's episode with David Goggins again, because Goggins talks about drawing energy from his environment, tapping into a frequency of reality that most people are completely blind to.
So when Osman says the chair is alive, he's not necessarily saying the chair is thinking about what it wants for lunch. He is saying the atomic structure, well, the quantum field that makes up the chair, is vibrating with the fundamental information of the universe.
Exactly. It goes back to quantum entanglement. If everything is connected, everything is participating in consciousness. Gopi Krishna wrote extensively about this when he detailed his Kundalini awakening. He described seeing the entire world dissolved into an ocean of radiant living energy. And Dr. Bonnie Greenwell, who spent her life studying these energetic awakenings, documented hundreds of cases where people suddenly started perceiving this exact living frequency in everyday objects.
It changes everything. It changes your whole perception of reality from a dead background to a deeply interactive living environment. Which brings us to the most important part for you, the listener. How do you actually use this information?
This is the core of Osman's scientific approach. He knows we are in the 21st century. He spent his life tirelessly trying to simplify these incredibly complex protocols so we can achieve results in as easy a method as possible.
Because realistically, we cannot sit in a cave for 18 hours a day.
No, we can't. And Osman developed a 5-minute yoga and meditation program. It is a highly condensed, results-oriented 5 minutes that can change consciousness from day one. He calls it an emergency button.
The emergency button, I love that. It is a tool for stress relief, so you do not have to resort to drugs or spiral into anxiety. You just hit the button and reset your frequency.
And this methodology of micro-habits and scientific rewiring is backed up everywhere. Look at the Mel Robbins podcast. Mel's entire philosophy is based on the 5-second rule, making immediate physical changes to bypass the brain's panic algorithms.
Totally. What are the specific Mel Robbins episodes that relate to this?
Well, there's her episode with Dr. Russell Kennedy focused entirely on healing anxiety by connecting with the body's energy rather than just overthinking. Then her episode with Dr. Amy Cuddy about how changing your physical posture literally changes your brain chemistry and frequency in minutes. And her deep dive episode into the Harvard study on adult development showing how grounded purpose and connection directly influence our physical health.
Osman's 5-minute protocol is essentially taking those same neurological and energetic principles, but applying them from a master yogic perspective.
Exactly. And you see the exact same themes on the School of Greatness podcast with Lewis Howes. Lewis had Tony Robbins on. Tony Robbins talks endlessly about state change, how you can radically shift your biochemistry in seconds using breath and focus. Osman is teaching the root ancient science of that state change.
Lewis Howes also had Deepak Chopra on.
Yes. Deepak Chopra explicitly discusses quantum healing on the School of Greatness. He talks about how the body is not a physical structure, but a flowing river of energy and information. And Lewis's episode with Sadhguru, where they discuss conscious engineering, designing your internal state regardless of external circumstances.
It is all pointing to the exact same truth. This is not woo-woo magic. It is an ancient lost science. And Osman is giving away the basic instructions for free. You can find that instruction on his YouTube channel, and you can go to yogawellness786.com to dive deeper into his scientific approach.
Yes. And if you want the heavy premium bioenergy healing for critical care, that is a paid service on his Patreon, but he does not hold back the core daily techniques from his free audience. He wants to empower people.
So to bring this all together and summarize this incredible deep dive, the Buddha was not liberated because his job as an avatar requires him to stay in the game to help us. Maya, the illusion that wipes our memory, is actually a profound mercy that allows us to function without being crushed by the weight of our past lives.
And being awake means opening your spiritual eye to see the quantum reality, seeing the living consciousness in the mountain, the ocean, the soil, and the chair you are sitting on.
It shifts the entire goalpost of spiritual life. It is not about escaping reality. It is about seeing reality clearly. It frames spirituality as a service. You come back to help, rather than just looking for an exit strategy.
It completely redefines what it means to be a spiritual master.
It really does. So here is the final provocative thought I want to leave you with. If the awake state involves seeing inanimate objects as having their own consciousness and independent frequencies, how does that change the way you interact with your physical environment right now?
If the chair you are sitting on is alive in terms of energy, are you treating your environment with the same respect you treat people?
Think about that the next time you interact with anything around you. Check out The Blind Muslim Yogi on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And we will catch you on the next Deep Dive.